Howdy, it's Jim Murado, and I am taking you on a little trip with me. Actually, I took this trip in the middle of July 2020, and I drove down to Hodgenville, Kentucky to check out all the great Abraham Lincoln sites. And we're at the Knob Creek Farm. This is, Abraham Lincoln's boyhood home here in Kentucky. And even, 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, there was one other couple there. And I know if you check out other Lincoln sites, if you go to Springfield, if you go to the Thomas Jefferson sites, there's a lot of other presidential homes you can check out that are just crowded all the time. So you can see some pretty cool historical spots here, and often there's just not a big crowd, which is a shame, but it's a benefit to road trippers like us who enjoy going to see that sort of thing. And again, this is the first site. They don't even have it staffed at the moment with everything going on. So we were walking around. You can cover this area fairly thoroughly in half an hour most days. I know I've talked to rangers here before, and they're usually pretty friendly. But I thought I would just read the historic markers to you, just so you get an idea of stuff. The actual state highway historic marker out front, right in front of the cabin here, reads Lincoln Knob Creek Farm. Abraham Lincoln lived on this 220-acre farm, 1811 to 1861. He wrote in 1860, quote, "My earliest recollection is of the Knob Creek place," end quote. A younger brother was born here. I think that's really exciting, thinking that Abraham Lincoln's earliest memory is of this spot that we're looking at right now. I also wanted to mention, I went here for the first time back in college. If you look at the very front, there's like this big visitor center here, and then over to those are the restrooms, by the way. That's not the cabin or the visitor center, but there's the big visitor center, and then there's the cabin right beside it. And the cabin, is pretty small, but a buddy took me here, and we get there, and I'm like, wow, Lincoln lived in a pretty nice log cabin. I was looking at the visitor center, and he goes, no, his place was, right beside it, the little tiny building right beside it. Yeah, there's just that little cabin there beside it, and that represents where Lincoln lived. And there's a whole lot about that, too, you can read up on, but let me read a couple of the other historic signs here, just to give you a rough idea of what this says. And also, if you can't make it out there, this will tell you, roughly what's going on. This is from a sign about slavery in the valley. Abraham Lincoln most likely encountered slavery while living here as a young child. In 1811, when Lincoln was 2 years old, this portion of Kentucky was part of Hardin County. At the time, there were 1,007 slaves in Hardin County, compared to 1,627 white males who were 16 years of age or older. 5 years later, when the Lincoln family moved from Kentucky, the owner of nearby Atherton's Ferry owned 8 slaves. Historians are just beginning to learn about the history of slavery in this area. In addition to the likely presence of slaves on some neighboring farms, the Old Cumberland Trail, today U.S. Highway 31 East, ran directly beside the Lincoln family farm. It was a main route between Louisville, Kentucky, and Nashville, Tennessee. Some historians believe it was one of the overland routes slave dealers used to transport enslaved African Americans from Kentucky to slave markets further south. Lincoln's parents, Thomas and Nancy, attended the Little Mound Baptist Church. This church is believed to have been formed by anti-slavery advocates in 1810. It may have been part of a much larger anti-slavery movement within the Baptist churches of Kentucky beginning in the 1790s. Lincoln later recalled that his father's decision to move the family from Kentucky to Indiana was partly due to slavery. Kind of an interesting marker there for sure. And I'm walking away from the cabin right here, going down towards the creek. And there are some signs by the creek warning about venomous snakes, and that's a little bit of a deterrent. Not a big snake fan. But it's just a pretty scene there, and behind the cabins is kind of their farm area, the area where they farmed. And I'm going towards the creek, and there is a historic sign there, and the sun reflected on it perfectly to where I'm not able to read it, so please forgive me for that. But I'm going down to the creek, and it's exciting knowing that Abraham Lincoln would have ran around in this area, and he would have played in the same creek that I'm about to go to, which is actually pretty dry on this day. There's a few fish. Luckily, there were no venomous snakes, which made me happy. I wanted to, because we have some time here, I basically just wanted to read some more of the historic markers because I think they're interesting. Just so you know a little bit more about this particular site, and then we're going to hit the road and drive up to the Lincoln Museum there in Hodgenville. And this is from a historic sign beside the cabin that we just kind of came from, and it talks about the Lincoln Tavern and Knob Creek site were added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1988 and became part of the National Park Service in 2001. The Lincoln Tavern. Hattie Howe Howard, born about 10 miles from here in 1886, grew up hearing local lore about Abraham Lincoln. After her brother James opened the Nancy Lincoln Inn next to Abraham Lincoln Birthplace National Historical Park, Hattie looked for her own opportunity to honor the 16th president. In 1928, she and her husband Chester purchased the Knob Creek Farm. The Howards hoped to preserve the land and use the site to share the story of Lincoln's early years in Kentucky. To serve the growing number of tourists, they built the Lincoln Tavern you see here. The tavern opened for business in 1933. Visitors enjoyed food and refreshments from the tavern's kitchen and stopped to buy gas from the pumps outside. There was also live music and dancing in the evening. The Howards built the tavern from rough-hewn logs using trees found on the property, just as frontier settlers like Thomas and Nancy might have done. Okay, yeah, so I guess that's basically where what I call the visitor center was. Hey, and we're looking at some little fish there. There are some fish in the creek, and I was glad to see them. Not much else going on, though. Again, I was glad not to see snakes. And then there's, I know there's at least one more sign I wanted to read a little bit from. Yeah, the Lincolns at Knob Creek. Challenges to land titles were common in Kentucky's early years, and the Lincoln family experienced these problems firsthand. In 1911, Thomas and Nancy Lincoln moved here to Knob Creek with their 2 children, Sarah and Abraham. They leased 30 acres of bottomland along the old Cumberland Trail, and it was here that their 3rd child, Thomas, was born and died in infancy. Abraham and his sister attended the local school located 2 miles northeast of here. 2 teachers, Zachariah Riney and Caleb Hazel, gave young Abraham his first formal schooling. Lincoln's classroom education, however, would not last. The demands of the frontier required him to work the family farm, but he continued his education. He borrowed books and read them in front of the fireplace or under a shade tree. In 1815, the Lincolns and 9 of their neighbors were involved in a land title dispute for the entire Knob Creek Valley. The next autumn, Thomas Lincoln lost a court case to regain the Sinking Spring Farm, where the Lincoln Birthplace Memorial is now located. He then moved the family to present-day Spencer County, Indiana. Yeah, that's pretty fascinating. If you're familiar with southern Indiana, over by not too far from Santa Claus and Holiday World, that area is actually where the Lincoln family moved to, and that's a fun area to go to. There's a state park and a national park, and I'm sure we'll get there again at some point. I've been there a couple times with my dad, and I need to get back there again just to film. And I wanted to mention, right as we left the park, my camera did not film for about 30 seconds to a minute, but I wanted to film as complete of a trip as I could, going from the Knob Creek farm to the basically Hodgenville, right, kind of in the heart of Hodgenville, the downtown area. There's a great great Abraham Lincoln Museum, and I'm going to include, not on this video, but I'm gonna put that up as a different video just to spread things out a little bit. But we are driving right now towards. We're actually driving towards, what everybody thinks of as it's the Lincoln birth site, the big national park area, and that's where we're going to. But not quite halfway between the two national park sites, I guess you would say. Right in Hodgenville is the Abraham Lincoln Museum, and it's a really attractive little town. I can't say enough about it. It's growing on me. They have just a nice little circle, a little roundabout that I think of that as Hodgenville, even though Hodgenville's obviously bigger. But there's a roundabout, and they have, I believe, a fairly new Vibe Coffee. And I've been to the Vibe Coffee in Elizabethtown, and I like it a lot. It's a little pricey, but they've got good coffee and they're independent, so you should definitely stop there. And they've also got a really nice, there in Hodgenville, they've got a really nice, I think it's called the Treat Shop or the Sweet Treat, where they sell candy, and it's basically just homemade treats. And there was one other sign from the site we were just at, and I thought I would read that to you just because it's there, and it's just a sign kind of telling about the park in general. My earliest recollection is of the Knob Creek place, Abraham Lincoln, 1960. Abraham Lincoln's family moved here from his birthplace in Sinking Spring Farm in 1811, when the future president was just 2 years old. Lincoln's earliest memories were of life along Knob Creek, and his experiences in this valley shaped the man who would guide the nation through the bloodiest conflict on American soil, the Civil War. Here you can explore the land that Lincoln trod as a boy, see the fields he once helped plant, and stroll by the creek that provided vital water for his family and their farm. See a period cabin like the one the Lincolns lived in, and a garden of crops, corn, tobacco, and pumpkins, similar to those planted by Thomas and Nancy Lincoln and still grown by farmers in this region today. You can also hike the Overlook Trail to sample the natural beauty and rich resources of the Kentucky Knob region, which lured Native Americans, early pioneers, and frontier settlers like the Lincolns. Lincoln in Kentucky. Abraham Lincoln Birthplace National Historical Park has 2 units. This is the Knob Creek Lincoln Boyhood Home Unit. The Abraham Lincoln Birthplace Unit is located about 20 minutes south of here on U.S. Highway 31 East. And then at the Knob Creek site, there's the Overlook Trail. This hike offers a spectacular view of the Knob Creek Valley, dotted with its cone-shaped limestone hills. Time, 2 to 3 hours. Distance, 3 miles round trip. Difficulty, strenuous and steep. Take plenty of drinking water and be alert for snakes and ticks. Yeah, that's that big hike might be something to do on another day. That warning about ticks, I have seen a lot of ticks this year, and that warning also about snakes and that sign we saw earlier about venomous snakes, that might deter me from doing that ever. That just does not sound like a good idea to me at the moment. Actually, it kind of does. I kind of want to do that just to say I did it at some point. So yeah, there's that big walking trail there if you want to do it. I think most people just stop by and hang out for 20 minutes, half an hour like we just did on the way to the bigger unit of the national park here. And this is some pretty driving. And Hodgenville is just so central Kentucky. It's hour and a half drive from Owensboro, Lexington, Louisville. I don't think Bowling Green would be that far from here either. Elizabethtown is, just about in its backyard. So this is a great area. There should be more school trips to this place. I grew up. I went to Utica Elementary School, 15 minutes or so out of Owensboro, and we never went here. And I remember going on field trips, but why did we not go to this area? This would have been mind-blowing. Oh well. Still, and again, what a great drive. Just nice cornfields. It's so rural. I love driving in areas like this. I could do this all day long, and often on weekends I do just go out places like this because it's so nice. Again, I mentioned I was in college. I was going to Berea, and a buddy of mine, Eric Harden, kind of lives in this area, and we were talking, and he said, "Hey, if you ever stop by my house, we'll go by and see the Lincoln cabin." And he took me there, and I just really thought that was great. I've read places, and I wanna be careful because I don't want to give you information that's not a fact. But I know, especially with both cabins, there's that the cabin that we just saw, and then the birth cabin that we're about to go to, and there's been a whole lot of controversy in the past, historic controversy about where was the actual cabin located and all that, and especially the cabin we're going to. There was some controversy about whether or not they actually used logs from Lincoln's cabin in that cabin, because for a while it was kind of claimed to be the cabin. That story in particular, I think, has been pretty debunked. And then also, I think the cabin we were just at, I think they kind of base its location on, there was some guy that kind of remembered being there when he was young, and he kind of sort of thought maybe the cabin was in this area. But yeah, that's a whole topic for another day. Yeah, so yeah, we're right here in the center of Hodgenville. We are about to pull into the museum here shortly. Yeah, a nice little guy waves at us. Howdy. Yeah, so yeah, here's the museum, and I am going to include some information about that on my next video. That's the Lincoln Museum in Hodgenville. So check that out. And again, more on that in my next video.